We're going to be doing something a little different this week. We're taking the show on the road and doing this week's interview in a remote studio. Joining me is a personal hero of mine, a former guest on the Rubin Report, and now someone that I'm incredibly proud to call a friend, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Ayaan's life story is a true testament to the human spirit, which shows that any of us, including a little girl born in Somalia who underwent female genital mutilation, can make anything with their life and really show what the human spirit is all about. If you want to test people on whether they truly stand for liberalism, tolerance, and Western values, just ask them what they think of Ayaan Hirsi Ali. The people who really believe in the individual and in human rights will be firmly in her corner, while those who stand for moral relativism and collectivist thinking will be against her. In an unfortunate sign of the times, speaking your mind as Ayaan does comes with a certain cost. So unfortunately, we can't share the location of where we did the interview, but I do want to take a moment and thank everyone who helped facilitate it. And without any further ado, here's my chat with Ayaan Hirsi Ali. All right, we are on location this week, and I am with activist and author and one of my favorite people on the planet, and now I can call you friend, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
David, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
I can't believe that somehow this is our first time sitting down in person.
That's right. We did it over Skype a few times, I guess. Yeah.
Here we are.
And a lot of email. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said to you last night that what I don't want to do today for this hour is just tell your story again, because it's been told so many times. It's an incredible story. For you, it must be sort of exhausting to tell it over and over. And we'll link to it below so that people can get it if they don't know it. Mm-hmm. But is there one piece of your story that you think has either been misconstrued or is an important piece that people haven't quite got, or anything like that?
Well, it's the reason why I tell it at all, which is I use it to illustrate that it's possible, to be born in Africa, grow up in a Muslim household, and go through all sorts of adversities and come out whole and wholesome and healthy. And what I see sometimes, what some of my opponents use, is they say, oh, she went through all of these terrible things, and she's angry, she's resentful, she's miserable, and so she's using Islam to get back at an unhappy childhood. And I think that's false.
Yeah, and especially now that I've gotten to know you a little bit, I don't sense any of that. I mean, there's such light in you and goodness and all of those things, and I don't sense any of that. But we're sort of just stuck in a situation where even by talking about this, it's somehow they want to project something on you, right?
That's right. But I mean, if you look at the arguments of my opponents, what you see is they run out of logical consistency. They want to defend a system of life or a theory for life that is intolerant, that is anti-women, anti-gay, that conflates religion with politics. And some of them, really honest ones, defend it and go all the way to say, this philosophy is better than all other man-made philosophies. And they talk good, all the terrible stuff, that's the outcome. But the ones who believe in it and promote it and yet, find themselves in this what I think of as cognitive dissonance, they're the ones who would use anything. So first they say she has no experience. Then I put my experience on the table and they say, okay, that's bad. That's because you're traumatized. Things are not in the Quran. And I show them what's in the Quran. And they say, yeah, you misinterpreted. Or you're doing something other than what it says. Yeah. And on it goes. So I think it's people who have no argument or weak argument who take refuge in these inconsistencies.
And just last night, we spent some time with some people that really had interesting arguments, and we didn't all agree on things, which I thought was wonderful. And people were quoting the Quran and all of this stuff, and that's what discussion is about, which is why this whole thing is so related to free speech and everything. Yeah. So instead of talking about some of the critics, let's talk about your new book. Should we call it a book or a booklet or a what should we officially call it?
It started out as a white paper.
Yeah.
It's now a booklet, and I hope to expand it to a book and start treating other subjects such as assimilation that are not in the booklet. But it's an argument. I'm basically saying in there that there's this term Dawa, that non-Muslims and Muslims should know about. I know that most people here, if you ask them about jihad, they have something to say about it. They may not agree on what it means, but most people are familiar with the term jihad.
Right.
If you understand jihad to be a holy struggle or a holy war against infidels, against unbelievers, then you have to understand that there is this whole process that's prior to jihad, and that is Dawa.
Yeah. So when you talk about Dawa, what you're really talking about it's political Islam, which is separate. It's not independent of, but it's separate than what we think of as religious Islam, right?
Yeah, I think I like talking about individuals because it's individuals who take actions,
Yeah.
and then there is the doctrine of Islam. So I think from the get-go you have to separate Islam as a doctrine
Yeah.
from Muslims as adherents. And Muslims...
Do you ever feel that no matter how much you do that a certain set of people just won't let you do that? Because I do it every week here whenever we talk about this
Yeah.
stuff, and a certain amount of people just, no matter how many times you do that,
Yeah.
they're just not going to have it.
They're not going to have it, but I'll keep doing
Yeah,
it.
fair enough.
I think it's very important to separate the doctrine from the people. And if you look at the adherents, what they do is they look at the doctrine and they select out of the doctrine what they want. So if you look at Islamic doctrine, Islamic history, Islamic scripture, you will see that politics and religion are intertwined. But there are many Muslims who just stick to what is religious. They'll say, look, I pray, I fast, I would like to go to Mecca, or they go to Mecca if they can afford to. But other than that, and their attitude toward other people, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims, and their religiosity is to say, unto you your religion and unto me mine.
Right.
And all of this is in Islam.
Yeah.
So for those people, I like to describe them as Mecca Muslims,
Yeah.
because what they're doing is they're selecting out of that whole doctrine the bits and pieces that were revealed in Mecca to Muhammad. So Muhammad, the founder of Islam, when he was in Mecca, he was saying certain things, he was behaving in a certain way, and there's that legacy, and they like to stick to that. Mecca Muslims, how many they are, I can't tell you. I think they probably could be the largest number of Muslims. Maybe they're decreasing in number now because the other group, the Medina Muslims, the ones who look at Muhammad's life and legacy and take whatever it is that he established in Medina, which is heavy on politics, heavy on military, those are the Muslims that engage in Dawa.
So when we talk about this Mecca and Medina stuff
Yeah.
and the history of this and all that, do you sometimes fear that by focusing too much on that we end up getting lost in historical things that don't necessarily tie us fully to what's
Yeah.
happening now?
Well, there's always a risk of getting lost in history, but I think in terms of trying to differentiate, because we live at a time when we really have to make it very clear that not all Muslims are dangerous or that not all Muslims are a threat to us. And in doing so, you have to really mind your language, and you have to find ways in separating those who are a potential threat or are a threat and are Muslim, because you and I think many more people now agree with us that some of the phenomena of jihad we're seeing has its roots in Islam. If you believe that it doesn't, then you can go and get lost in history and other discussions, because you always want to take the discussion off the table.
Right.
But if we all agree, okay.
So basically you can always find some historical event to pin on instead of what comes from doctrine.
Yeah. So again, if we go back to, let's look at individuals. It's an individual who takes part in discussions. And there are people who are taking part in this discussion in the confrontation between Islam and the West and Islam and the rest of the world, and who just happen to believe Islam as a religion, as a doctrine, has nothing to do with what we are seeing. Islam has nothing to do with ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab, with terrorism, with jihad, with misogyny, none of that.
Right.
And I think it's I don't know about you, but it's very difficult for me to talk about this subject with those people.
Yeah.
Because I feel like their job is to deflect, and mine is to illuminate as much as possible. And I think
Yeah.
it's helpful if we can pinpoint exactly what it is about Islam that we don't like, and that's a threat. And more importantly, who are the Muslims who are seeking to use Islam as a tool for political power, for domination, for misogyny, and to justify the unjustifiable, throwing people from tall places to their death, killing and enslaving women, regurgitating anti-Semitism. You know, we thought after 1945, with the end of the Second World War, that there was this enormous insight in the West: no more anti-Semitism, never again. And now it's become, I don't know how often you visit or go to Europe, but in Europe, anti-Semitism is back, and it's back because of Islam.
Yeah. So, okay, so there's a bunch there. So when people talk about these books, one of the things that I'll hear people say is, well, wait a minute, the Old Testament has a ton of bad stuff in it.
Yes.
I suspect you wouldn't disagree with that.
No.
The New Testament actually has less bad. Out of the three, if you were looking at them in terms of violence, I think the New Testament is certainly the least violent of the three. But what is the difference then that makes the individuals act on one of them more than the others? Is it just that this is the newest one and it hasn't gone through that reformation or that maturation or whatever else? Or is it specifically the point of the text?
Well, I think historically, if you look at the history of Christianity, you'll see that there's been a lot of internal fighting about what Christianity should mean, the place of the Old Testament, the place of the New Testament. There was this whole process of Reformation, the Enlightenment, and beyond. Even postmodernism is part of, the place of Christianity. And one of the things that I think made it easier for Christians to move forward was that from the get-go, politics and religion were separate. So you couldn't be declared not to be Christian if you proposed or you were a proponent of man-made laws and rules. With Islam, we're not yet there. And there have been individuals in the history of Islam who fought for a separation of religion from politics. They've all been marginalized. They've been forgotten by most Muslims. They are celebrated only by non-Muslims in the Christian world. But and to this day, there are Muslims. I call them reformers. I call them modifiers. It's that third group. There's the Mecca, the Medina, and the modifiers.
Right.
To this day, you have these Muslims who want to modernize, who want to liberalize, who want to move forward, and who wants to say, let's just separate politics from religion so that no religious person uses Islam as a tool for political domination. But again, they're marginalized, they're sidelined, they're threatened.
So is this the ultimate failing of what the frustrations that we and many others have with the left, that they have actually held Islam hostage in a weird way? Because every time someone comes out and says, I want to reform the faith, or what Majid Nawaz is trying to do with Quilliam Foundation and many other people now, and fortunately, as we were talking about, there is a growing movement there, but every time they step out of that lane, they get slammed. So it's the liberals, unfortunately, the left, that is holding the more extreme elements of Islam in power.
I think that
a part of it, of course, it's not. Of course, it's not all of it.
So there's the internal dynamics of Islam and Muslims and how they fight out what to retain of Islam and what not to.
Yeah.
And then there are the external pressures. And I think when we talk about, because this is really relevant for Muslims living inside Western countries with a left and a right, where the left find themselves, I just want to say inadvertently, I can't believe that they really mean it and that they're doing this consciously and willingly.
Yeah.
But they find themselves inadvertently aligned with the Islamists. I've had some people say that's because the left hates America, the left hates capitalism, the left can't deal with political freedom, and to find another group with a similar outlook, even though they want a different outcome,
right?
That it's easy and very natural for the far left to align itself not only with Islam and Islamism, but also with other radical anti-Western movements.
Yeah. And this is basically what intersectionality is, right? These sort of oppressed groups that are coming together, and these quote-unquote oppressed groups that are coming together to form something bigger, even if their own, what they want at the end of the day is actually very different.
When I look at people talk about intersectionality and all, this whole identity politics thing, what I see is taking the human being, magnifying a biological attribute, and then putting them aside, putting them in a corner, as victims of oppression. And in a way, I feel sorry for them. I happen to be black, and I happen to be a woman, and I happen to be a minority in the United States. I even happen to be an apostate.
You're really going for the whole thing there, huh?
For the whole thing, yeah. So talk about intersectionality.
Yeah.
But none of that defines me as who I am. I'm more than all of that. And I most certainly don't see myself as a victim. And knowing people who grew up in Africa, who grew up in Muslim countries, you probably know also some gay people who had to struggle and go through adversity. I think when you come out of it, you come out as a proud survivor. You don't come out as a victim, and you don't want to be victimized. You don't want safe spaces. You don't want to be in this constant mental state of anger and full of resentment and wanting to lash out at others and demanding that society or whoever it is that you feel oppresses you gives you money and jobs. And no, you come out of this thinking, I've earned, I love to work. What I'm proud of in my journey is that I was able to say every time when I tried to run away from that husband, some of the Somalis around me would say, you're going to rot in hell. And there's absolutely no way you're going to survive outside of the extended family, the clan. You will end up being a whore. And now at the age of 47, I want to look back and tell them, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
I didn't end up being a whore. I don't think I'm going to burn in hell because I don't believe there's a hell. And I have a wonderful, comfortable life that I couldn't have if I had gone with that man.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't make me into a victim, intersectionality or no intersectionality.
Yeah.
So to me, the whole thing, the whole hogwash of, the language, I try to go through some of these articles and books, and they're so boring.
Yeah.
It's just one long excuse to wallow in self-pity. And that's not, those people don't speak for all blacks, for all women, for all minorities. They just speak for, in my view, a very small subsection of overprivileged individuals who are seeking to take advantage of the trend now of white guilt.
Yeah, so is the irony that it may not even be exactly what you say that is getting for your critics. It's not exactly what you're saying, which if you probably whittled it down, they might agree with you on some of it, privately at least. But it's that you don't act like a victim, and they can't. That is so counter to the entire movement that even if you could get them to privately say, you're making some good points, but that your very existence as a free, functioning, happy, successful person is counter to their movement, and that's more of a threat than whatever you can say about Islam or anything else.
That's a threat, and the leadership within this movement, I have no idea what to call them. You brought up the term intersectional. Are they called the intersectionals? God knows what they're called.
They love the Oppression Olympics, which I heard first from our friend Faisal.
Oppression Olympics, some of it, look at college campuses. There are freshmen, young, vulnerable students, impressionable minds, and their heads are filled with this nonsense that, they have to fear for their lives and that they're not safe on campus, on American campuses. And it's that kind of leadership that I find so toxic, because here you have young people, in my view, I come from Africa, people would kill to be in any one of these Ivy League universities and get an education. And here they are being told that if they read Plato or Shakespeare or Mark Twain, they are threatened somehow.
Or that there's rape culture there.
There's
or
a rape culture,
all of these other things.
And in this, what are you doing to these young people?
So where do you think the fault lies? Because I agree with you. I think a lot of the people that have bought into these ideas, I don't blame the 18-year-old kid who has been hit with this stuff and indoctrinated. I don't blame that kid. I would hopefully will fight to save some of their intellect at some point, and hopefully they'll hear some of our good ideas. But who do you blame? Do you blame the administrators first?
And the faculties. So the people who are putting these stupid programs together, and I think those programs should not be funded. And of course, the administrators, the faculty, you blame the people who are supposed to be the grown-ups in the room. And for them to, sign off on these programs where young people are being scared to death on campuses. And it's not, here's the paradox. The people that they're supposed to protect, and one is feeling protective of, are the ones who get disadvantaged ultimately. Because you make people see nothing else but their skin color, or nothing else but their gender, or their transgenderedness, or whatever it is, other biological attribute. And for 4 years or 5 years, you're in a setting where your demands are met, or supposedly met. I think usually people just ignore it.
Right, which would be the best thing to do, actually, I think.
You would think that, but then you graduate, and then you go you start taking part in real life. And then I wonder, what has this institution of learning done for these young people? What has it done to them?
Yeah. So if you were advising a school that was going through this, where every week we see another school going through this, and they want a professor fired, they want an administrator fired, what would you say to them? Okay, so we can defund some of this stuff, but is it really that we have to teach courses on this? Teach the reverse course. They're learning identity politics.
Yeah.
Do we need a counter course?
Yes, we need individuality courses. We need more courses on the American Constitution. The individuals who founded this country and the adversities that they went through. I would propose more programs on Western civilization, what makes it distinct from other civilizations, from other cultures. And I would most definitely emphasize, when it comes to freedom, the position of the individual, not groups, not individuals. You can pretend you're in some kind of group with all black people, but that's not the case. You are an individual, and your circumstances are different from other people's. And I think when you want, people say, well, if you're going through the same sort of suffering or through the same kind of adversity, it does help to organize, and it does most certainly, and to put on the table exactly what it is that these problems are, and together to work out as a group. But the members in that group are voluntary.
Yeah.
They actually say, I'm working with some Muslim women who understand that Sharia as a system of law is really something that's applied to their daily lives, that compromises their freedom, compromises their dignity. And as a group, they don't see themselves as victims of anything else other than this particular culture that's practiced by their own parents, their own extended family, their own community, and they want to change, and they want to change these communities. But outside of that, outside of those few hours when they're highlighting these issues, they're free individuals going about their daily lives.